let's say this computer's in one bedroom, this computer's in another bedroom or office within the same building, we're plugged in or wirelessly connected to a router. It doesn't make a difference. Whether it's plugged in or wireless makes no difference. The security vulnerabilities are the same, except with Wi-Fi, you add another layer of security vulnerability. If you don't have that connection encrypted, then somebody around the broadcast range of the router could be outside of the building hacking into you, which they cannot do with a solid cable. They'd have to be in the building plugged in. But with all the security enabled, you're good to go. Now this would be a router no differently than the router you have at home, only that this router is smaller. It's not as feature rich as what you probably have at home. And the one you have at home probably allows for multiple devices, 4 usually plugged in at the same time, whereas one of these might be 2 or 3 devices wired. Wirelessly, they'll be nearly identical. Okay, so this has 3 ports, 1 in, 2 out, and it's powered through USB power here. Interesting. See that they give us a little USB power adapter, because it's not USB-C. They give us an Ethernet cable and a USB power adapter. So the idea, I want you to think about the concept of how cool this is. The idea here is that we can take our computer power, just as we are using with this monitor, right? We got one cable providing power and video out of this computer, powering these 2 screens, and also providing the 2 screens with the data of the video display. Then included with this router, this is a GLI net, this one's called the Creta. You could take the regular USB type A end here and plug it in, again, to any USB port on your computer. And then a little Wi-Fi router here, a little travel router, gets plugged in. And now the computer is not only powering, this little computer is not only powering 2 monitors and a display, but is also now powering the Wi-Fi router. So now we're not, rushing to find plugs or something, especially in a hotel or a Starbucks or wherever you are. But obviously you need to have something turn this on. Or this could be a laptop and you're on battery. And your laptop's battery then would be obviously powering the screen as well as this little adapter. And your battery will drain a bit faster as a result of that, but that should be obvious. Now, if we hardwire our LAN connection in here, what I would do is I would take the Ethernet cable out of this MSO1 and plug it here. I'll need my glasses. There'll be a port that says WAN, Wide Area Network, or the world. So we want to plug into the world. That is the internet. If you're not sure when you have 3 of them, one will just have a different symbol. Then two symbols will be the same, one symbol will be different. And this one has symbols. And one looks like a little globe. That's the world. There, we're plugged into the world. Now, I can connect wirelessly from here to here and here to here, or just to keep things moving along, I can simply use these really thin Ethernet cables. But again, if you're traveling, you might not want to have all the cables. And I'll plug a black one in and a green one so I can tell them apart. And it doesn't matter which one I plug where. One goes here, and one goes back here. And again, we could do this completely wirelessly along with our phones, etc. This represents your router at home. Whether you connect to the router wirelessly or wired doesn't make a difference in how you share files. All the steps are the same. Back in the day when you had a corded telephone or you had a cordless telephone, it didn't make any difference whether or not you had the cord. The phone still worked and operated exactly the same way, same as here. I wire it because it's simple and clear. All right, and it's faster than going through the whole SSID and password on each one of these. And you don't have to do one or the other. You can do a combination of both. You can have it wired to some devices and wireless to others on all Wi-Fi enabled routers, be it portable or a home router. With them being plugged in, the other thing I need is an additional power cable so I can turn this unit on. I think that's pretty obvious that if the computer's not turned on, you're not going to be sharing any files to or from. Let me take a quick look here. Let's see, I've got a power cable down here somewhere. Yeah, this will work. Once again, this just uses a standard PC power cable. I've got tons of these laying around here. They're a dime a dozen on Amazon, so it's okay to, they're not difficult to find. It's okay to have some spares. So we'll plug this in and we'll give it a, plug it into the surge protector down here. And all I'm doing is basically, I just need keyboard, video, mouse, and power to both of these, and then hook up the network right up to this with it's being powered through USB. That's it. So it may look like a lot of wires here, but in fact, it's very straightforward and simple. If you have one computer, you have a certain number of wires that you may not find intimidating at all. That's my keyboard, that's my mouse, that's my monitor, that's my speakers, that's my power. But if you have another computer, then you're going to need the same cables. That's my keyboard, that's my mouse, that's my monitor, that's my network, that's my power. And if you have three computers, and then suddenly you have this big nest of cables. But it's all very simple. So with this plugged in, let's turn this bad boy on. And then let's go over to the capture card to see the desktop here. And I'll walk you through. Remember, these are both clean installs of Windows 11 Pro. It doesn't matter if it's Pro or Home. That used to matter back in the days. Don't waste your money on Pro. If you've got Home, you're fine. No reason to upgrade that. But here we go. So we've got these two machines. This one should be booting to the desktop. This one's sitting at the desktop. They are all default the way it installs clean out of the box for Microsoft. I've made no modification to them. Okay. So let's go back over to, this will be camera 2. That should pull up our desktop. Okay. Let me put camera 1 up at the same time so we're not going to lose which machine we're on. Okay, so this is the machine we're on right now. Clean install of Windows. Now let's say I want to share some files. Let's say I want to take these testing folders like hardware info and Crystal Diskmark and Cinebench and CPU-Z. I want to right click on those ones I've selected and select cut. We're going to make a new folder. New folder. And we're going to call it shared stuff. Call it whatever you want. And then to test it, we got to put something in it, right? So we'll just put that stuff in there. Now, while we're in here, we can do things such as go to Properties. This is actually not in there. Let's close this out. Let's right mouse click on that folder. Show more options. Where's my share? Properties, sharing, share. Choose people to share with. Now, this is where you have to either put in the exact name of whatever you're signing into with Windows. That's your username. That keeps other people out that are on your network already. So if you had a payroll department and you didn't want other employees seeing how much money people were making in the company, you might not include them in this particular share. But I want everyone in the building to have access. So I'll just type everyone. And you'll see that that's an identified user. I didn't just make that name up. It's an identified acceptable user choice that's in Windows. And that's why it's got the little icon next to it. It automatically capitalized it. Now, if I allow everyone access into this folder on my desktop, do I also want to give everyone permission to make any changes? So if this is an office and this contains Word, Excel documents that other people are going to work on, we need them to be able to save the changes. But by giving them the ability to save changes, we're also giving them the ability potentially to delete our files. But if we have backups, who cares? Also, if they're already in our building, we must trust them, right? We're already giving them a computer with network access. So, I mean, if you can't trust your own employees, I think maybe it's time to let some employees go. But we're going to give them read and write access, but this is your choice. That way they can make changes, and then we'll hit the share button. Now, in order to share, we have to turn off all of those security blocks that are in place on a default Windows 11 installation, same as Windows 10. We need something called network discovery turned on. So we're going to say yes on network discovery. It says your folder is shared, and this is where it's located. Okay, the other thing I want to do, we'll close all this out. I want to check a couple of network settings. If I come to my right bottom corner down here, right click on my wireless or wired connection and go to the settings where it says network and internet settings. We can take a look at our Ethernet connection to make sure that we're on a private network, not a public network. This is a private network. And while on the private network, let's go back, because we do not want to enable network discovery on a public network. That would mean Starbucks, McDonald's, the hotel. We want to absolutely be sure we're on a private network where this does not work. You can override it so that it does work on a public network, but that would be profoundly unwise. So the next thing you go to is advanced network settings down here. And it's very simple. We choose the adapter. Is it wired or wireless? We're wired, right? And then this tells us our connection speed and all this other stuff. And under advanced sharing settings, right down here, we're going to say we can set up network stuff automatically. Yes. Network discovery. Yes. Now, what about public networks? We want to turn public network stuff off for safety. It should only happen on private networks. And as far as any network goes, regardless of it's private or public, I don't want password protected sharing. You might, but I don't. I just want it open, just like it was a flash drive that we're sharing. That's my personal preference. And that should be all we need in theory, unless there's other Windows 11 security settings that this particular set of controls fixes. I'm not sure. Let's find out. So to find out, I am going to switch. I'm just going to pull the HDMI cable from this little computer and take it over here to the MSO1. And now we should be getting the desktop over here in just a second, as well as on these screens here. Yeah, there's my screensaver. Okay. Oh, and I need to move the keyboard and mouse. I don't have enough desk space to have 3 different keyboards and mice, so bear with me here. Just going to find somewhere I can plug this in. Now you also have the option of putting a unique name on this as it appears on the network, which I have not shown you. I usually just stick with whatever the default name is, but you can do either way. Why is my... I am confused. Why is that running? Let's go here to our Yellow Explorer folder, which probably opened. I guess having this other monitor up isn't such a good idea. Let me disconnect that, just so we're both looking at the same screen. There we go. Yeah, that's just my wallpaper running in the background. Okay, so when it comes to being able to see that folder we just shared, we definitely want to make sure a couple of settings are in place. So one would be right-click on this connection, network, and internet settings. And The Wi-Fi is turned on, but we're not using it right now. We're on the Ethernet. And on the Ethernet, what we want to know is, are we on a public or a private connection? And do we have network discovery turned on? So if I come down here to, where is it? Application authentication settings, is that it? No, that's not what I want. Let's go back here. Let's just go to advanced network settings down at the bottom. Oh, this has multiple Ethernet connections on it. That's why I'm so confused. So which one is connected? They're all enabled, but which one is the one connected? I mean, I'm assuming it's the top one. I don't know. Let's just go to advanced sharing settings for right now. And so for public networks, well, this is what I was looking for. Network discovery is off, file and printer sharing is off. For private networks, network discovery is on, so clearly I had turned this on before. Now, file and printer sharing is only if you want to share stuff. You don't necessarily need to turn this on to see somebody else's shares. But if we want to be able to go back and forth so they can see us and we can see them, and I have a shared folder and they have a shared folder, then we both need file and sharing turned on. So who's ever doing the sharing needs to have that on. So if everybody in the office is doing sharing, or you want to be able to send files either way, then we would also create a share here as well. And then as far as other networks, password, so I have previously configured this. Now, if I go to the yellow folder, whoops, and I go to the network, I should see this minis forum computer. Now it's telling me they're turned off. Why is it turned off? I'm going to turn that on. And it says, make the network I'm connected to a private network. Correct, that's what I wanted. So it even walks you through that. Now we've got something called desktop 9 TAD. Is that this little minis forum? I don't know. Users, public users, desktop. No, that's this desktop. That's this local computer. That's a little deceiving. So it's looking at itself. Let's go back over to the network again. This is, sorry, this is the MSO1 that we're looking at here. And let me just check the network settings one more time. It helps. So in my case, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 network cards. I've got the wireless card. I've got two, I think it's a 2.5 gig and a 5 gig. And then I have two SFP plus 10 gig ports. This MSO1 is a serious workstation. So I just need to figure out which one I'm on. So let's just go back to, turn that off. Back to that little screen, right click on that little screen, network and internet settings should be in here. Oh, it downloaded an update. Let's go ahead and put that update on because this could affect our ability to network the computers. I cannot emphasize how important it is that if you postpone your updates, you set all this up, there may be a new security setting that goes in that just turns around and disables what you just did. I'd rather just set it up once. But it is possible, especially after a big update like 23H2 to 24H2, that you have to reset things up again. So let's let that reboot. And again, we're on this machine right here. This is all set up, it's running. We should be able to access the share on this. Alan Lindos said he sent an Amazon gift card. Oh, let me check my phone, Alan. It's been a few minutes, like the whole show. Let me take a look. Oh, there you are. He goes, it's a rare Sunday broadcast and my usual late fee of $7.77. Right on. Well, thank you, Alan. I appreciate that very much. And again, another shout out and thank you to Mark Gaines who sent the Amazon gift card earlier. I think that catches me up. Okay. let these updates finish. William Lynn says, can I have one of these displays connected to one computer and another display connected to another, and then see them both at the same time? Say computer on the right on the top and computer on the left on the bottom. No, you cannot. No, in that case, you'd buy just 2 portable monitors. Okay, so if we look at our network settings again, let me go full screen over here. Let's try this one more time. Right click, network and internet settings. It says the one we're connected to is Ethernet number 2. And under properties, it is listed as a private network. Okay, that's what I wanted to see. And then all the way at the bottom, where's my advanced sharing here? Private, yes. If you don't see the advanced sharing here, simply go back to network and internet, scroll down, and you should see advanced sharing, or advanced network settings rather, all the way at the bottom. Let's just double check that Ethernet 2. Yeah, we are connected here. Advanced sharing, network discovery, and printer sharing have been turned on, and public networks, make sure they're off. And again, I want my password protected sharing turned off. All this other stuff really doesn't matter. Public folders, these are your basic, you know, when you click on this PC and you can see, you know, downloads, desktops, pictures, music, videos. These are your public folders. I believe those are the public folders. Anyway, I like to specifically pick which folders I want to share. So I always do that one by one. I wouldn't just share a whole C drive, for example. Now you notice when I click on network, I'm not seeing anything at this time. And that would imply to me that we're having perhaps a browsing issue, or we're not giving the network enough time to sort of look around. The other thing I want to make sure of, or double check, is the machine that we made changes on. I want to make sure those changes took effect. And so one way to easily do that would be to simply restart the machine, turn it off, turn it back on again, or just go to start and shut down and restart. Because for all I know now, the other machine may have been getting an update too. So what I'm going to do is just take a moment to take the HDMI cable out of the MSO1 and plug it back in over here. Now remember, we're talking about walking from one room to another to do this. I just happen to have both machines sitting on the desk here, so I can make light work out of this, where you might have to, you know, go up and down stairs or something. And once you set it up, you shouldn't have to mess with it anymore, again, unless some big update comes through. And then let me grab my keyboard and mouse so I can just double check what's going on. There we go. And let me just check this one more time. Network and internet settings. The trick is always going down to advanced network settings. Make sure that under advanced sharing settings, we are turned on. Network discovery has to be on. And for all networks, yeah, that's what I want. That's exactly what I want. And then the other thing, and we don't have to worry about it yet, but when you look under your sharing, you'll notice there's a couple different items here under the sharing tab, which is the share button and advanced sharing. So when we hit the share button, this is where we added everyone, right? But under advanced sharing, you have some more folders, like share this folder, what it's called, and then any permissions. And in this case, I want to give everyone full control. We'll click OK. That may be a step that needs to be done. It can get a little confusing to go, well, didn't you set that in the first one? It depends on the level of sharing you want to do. And the other thing I want to do is log out and log back into Windows. And the fastest way for me to do that is to reboot it, just restart it. And then we'll let that get back to the desktop. Oh, and I'm also going to show you where you can change your computer's name so you can locate it easily on the network. by default, Windows gives these computers a name that doesn't really make any sense. I don't know how they come up with it, but it's going to make a lot more sense to a human being if you name it yourself. And it's not often something you do during Windows setup, so it just goes with a default name. If we just type in the word system down here, I think that'll get us there. System information? No, that's not going to get us there. I'm going to right click on this computer and go to properties. And then what that does is this brings up our, let me minimize this a little bit, resize it, I mean. You'll see it says rename this PC. We're in system and about. Okay, in case you're wondering where we are. Go to settings, go to system, go to about. You could probably just type in rename PC down here, it might be a shortcut. Let's rename this because this PC name is desktop 4BV. I don't know what any of that means. So let's just call it the UN, what did I say this was? 1250. I think that's what it's called. So it's renaming the computer on the network. That's the computer's name on the network. And we need to log out and log back in again to the network for that name to communicate with the router. Say from now on, I've just done a name change. Okay. If you're not networking, you probably don't even care what your computer's name is. It's just really the name you're going to see in your, like with Acronis, it'll default to that as your backup name, or on a network, which is more likely where you're going to have any potential confusion. And once again, in our shared folder, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 folders in here, okay? So let's say I don't want to re-download these on every computer I'm testing, so I just put it on a network share, and then I go over to the computer I'm testing. So again, we'll take our HDMI cable out, move it over to the MSO1. Bearing in mind, these would ordinarily be 2 computers in 2 separate rooms of the building, all plugged in. We wouldn't be sharing an HDMI cable or a keyboard or mouse. I'm only doing that because I'm here on a workbench trying to demonstrate this without having to walk around the house, like to show you in real time what that looks like. That's why I say networking requires some visualization of what you're doing and what we're trying to accomplish. So if we go back over here, we'll click on network again. Let's see, it still says it's empty. Let's down. Why are we not seeing anything still? I'm going to restart this computer now that we've changed the network name. And now these restarts may not be entirely necessary, but they're not hurting anything, right? These are fast computers. They just take a minute to restart. And at least that way, our network diagnostic is clean. It's entirely possible when we reboot, all this works fine, or it's entirely possible when we reboot, we're still missing another step. So just bear with me for a second, because I don't do this every single day. Because I don't do it every single day, I don't have the entire process memorized click for click, but I have the overall concept, so it just takes a minute for me to realign myself. If you've never done it before, give yourself that permission. Don't get frustrated and give up. There's a box somewhere that needs to be checked, or you just need to restart. And since restarting is the simple, easy thing, always start with the simple, easy thing first, and then it's determined if you can move on, and enjoy your shared folder, or if you're still configuring it. So with a nice clean reboot, let's go back to our yellow folder, back over to our network, and see if we're seeing anything shared here. It's looking. It's coming up with nothing. So that suggests to me that we have potentially in the router itself created a guest network unknowingly. That may be default, and the router's preventing it, or I still have something configured missing the config. So I'm going to look one last time, just to see if I'm missing anything. Look back over to our advanced network settings and advanced sharing. That's on, that's on, that's on. That's all it should be. We need to be on a private network, which is our current profile, and we need to make sure private Our private network has network discovery on. This is a public network. We do not want network discovery or file and printer sharing on a public network. We only want it on a private. This is really for me sharing files with others. So for example, we'll reverse it the other way around. This is also another test you can do. We can make a file, a folder here, or heck, let's just take the Crystal Diskmark Portable and let's share it with everybody. Let's see if it works the other way, just to determine if it may be a setting in the router. Let's go to Properties, and we'll go to Sharing, and we need to change the share name, the computer name. So let me change the computer name first. So we're going to go under here and we'll type in change computer name, and it brings up tutorials. That's not where I wanted to go. I'm going to just right click on this computer, go to Properties, and I'm going to say rename this PC, and this is the MS01 PC. Click OK. It's going to change the name on the network, and we're going to restart. When we restart, then I'm going to go ahead and just add a shared folder, make sure that the permissions are, no password, on private networks only, and then go back to this machine and see if it reads it the other way. If it's not reading in either direction, it's possible you're on a guest network. That's the point of a guest network, is to keep people out of your stuff. It just isolates them to internet access only. That's why you might want an appliance or security device, an Internet of Things, Ring doorbell, camera, garage door opener on your guest network. Because if those items get hacked and those are on your main network, then your bad guys can get through your garage door opener into your main network. But if the garage door opener is on its own guest network, along with all the other appliances, they can hack the appliances all day. They won't go any further than that. That's where we're at with security these days. People are just ridiculous. So let's right click on a folder that we want to share. I'm going to go to Properties. Now I'm going to share it. And we'll say to share it here. We're going to share that with everyone. And I want to give everyone read and write access. Now in theory, by hitting the share button, that's all we should have to do. But if you want to be very thorough about it, and it does tell you if your computer's asleep or turned off, people can't see it. I mean, duh. We can go to Advanced Sharing, and we can make sure that we have Share This Folder checked, name the folder, which is the default folder name, or you can put any name you want there. With regards to permissions, we've got everyone with full control. Click OK, and click OK, and close. Okay, so now this folder here is shared on the network, and the other folder on the other computer, they should be able to see each other. So what I want to do is take the HDMI cable back over to the UN1250, and I need my keyboard and mouse. We'll plug that in here. Okay. Back over to my yellow folder, over to network. Oh, look at this. File sharing is turned off. That would explain why I wasn't able to see the other way around. Let's turn that on. Something changed that. So I'm going to go back down here one more time. Again, once you set this, unless there's a big Windows update, you should never have to set it again. So when I set this up for businesses, it's usually just that first configuration, and we're good to go. Now we're on Ethernet 2, which should be on a private profile. And sharing, network discovery is on private networks. File and printer sharing is on private networks. Public networks, it's off. And with all networks, I've got the password protected off. Everything looks good to me. And my current profile, am I on public or private? How do I know? It tells me right here, right at the top, I'm on a private network. In doing such, I should see other computers on my network. I should see the MSO1, and the MSO1 should see the UN1250. So when this isn't working properly, and normally this is a very simple thing when we're dealing with regular home-based routers. Because this is a travel router, it is possible its default settings are different from a home router. And it's worth discussing because your router could be preventing your sharing. Your network cabling itself might be good enough for internet, but just failing on sharing if you're using older cables. Or your router or any other networking equipment may need to be unplugged and plugged back in again if it's been a long time. All of that can potentially fix this. And once it's fixed, as I mentioned, once it's configured, it should stay configured indefinitely. So I am a little baffled that that's not showing up. And the one part of the equation that's different is this little router right here. So I can't help but wonder if maybe that sharing was by default turned off because it's a travel router. Let's take a look at it. The way we can find out what this router is and how to configure it is to type in CMD and hit enter. And then when the text box comes up, we just type in ipconfig. That's going to give us a gateway. The gateway is just another term for router in our case here. So to type in 192.168.8.1 gives us access to this router. So we just open a browser and we type in 192.168.8.1. Close that tab. So it wants to know an admin password. That's written on the bottom of the router. Oh my goodness. These glasses make it very difficult for me to see. This has got our SSID and password default. Doesn't show the login default. So let me try, I don't know, admin? Does that get us in? No. Okay, that got us in. We have an upgrade to do on this router. Let me turn off camera one for a second so you can see. Let's go over to, I gotta go full screen so I can see. So this is the router firmware, and it's telling us there is a new version. We've got 4.3.17. It says there's 4.3.18. Let's go ahead and upgrade it. These kind of firmware updates can also be fixing sharing issues as well as security issues that are vulnerabilities that a hacker can use. The hackers can get in easier than we can. So that's kind of the state of it. Now this is a quick upgrade. This just uses OpenVPN, or OpenWR2 is what I mean to say. And I really like that because it's an open source firmware on the router. And just like any other BIOS update or firmware update, just leave it alone, don't unplug it, let it do its firmware upgrade and restart itself. It may be that, again, we could have default settings that disable the file sharing, and it could be that through an update they change those default settings. So regardless, we want the update on for all of those reasons. And you absolutely want to make sure when you're networking, especially if you're struggling with anything, you're running the latest network card drivers, whether it's wireless or Wi-Fi, just because it's working. It's quite possible that the reason you can't see anything on your network is the driver you're using for your network card is outdated and Windows Update hasn't offered you a new one. And what you should do is either go to the manufacturer's page of the motherboard or the manufacturer's page of the network card. See if there's a newer version. If it's Realtek, MediaTek, Intel, they release new versions about every 6 or 8 weeks. So if you're still running a driver from 2019, it won't hurt you to update that to a driver from, say, even 2023. It's still going to be much, much newer. There's a reason why these drivers get updated. And just because Windows Update doesn't present it to you, doesn't mean you don't need it. And that is the next super easy thing to check. We've talked about restarting the equipment. We've talked about checking your cable. Make sure it's plugged in all the way, that the cables are good. If you have pets or rodents, they could have chewed through the cable such that the cable sort of works. So always check the easy things first. The next thing is obviously, is the router up to date? It's an easy thing to look for. If it's equipment provided by your cable provider, if it's a modem and a router built in, your cable provider does all this for you. This is if you bought your own. And then making sure you have the latest network card driver installed. I have more times than I can count solved frustrating networking problems that didn't make any sense by simply updating the driver, and then everything worked fine. Networking is incredibly simple. And the harder it is for you to configure, the harder it is for the bad guys to get in. So if you're like shaking your fist going, why is this so difficult? It's because of all the bad people that want to take everything from you. If those people didn't exist, we wouldn't have to go through any of this. But unfortunately, not only do those people exist, they're growing in number every day by the thousands. So the threats are worse today than they were yesterday, and they're much worse yesterday than they were a year ago. So that's why all these updates are so critical and so important. But when they're applied, and you have antivirus, and you have, like I use Malwarebytes, a paid version, we're using the Windows firewall, we're keeping our router updated, you should have good peace of mind that you are secure, as long as you're not clicking willy-nilly on things that show up in your inbox or on your screen, and basically undoing all of your own security. You should have confidence that you can not expect to get hacked easily unless someone has specifically targeted you. So for example, you're a celebrity or a public figure, they know who you are and they're going after you. Otherwise, they don't know who you are. You've just left the door open. They don't know if you're rich or poor. They don't know. They'll break in and take what you got. So, was a comedian said the other day, someone came into my house, they broke in looking for money. So I helped them. Like, yeah, let's see if we find any. Now, the reason we're saying they can't reach this page is the router's rebooting itself. After it applies a firmware update, just like a computer BIOS update, it has to restart. That's going to take a minute. Usually the lights on the front indicate status, and depending on how big the firmware update is and how powerful the router is, depends on how long this takes, but usually just about 2 or 3 minutes. There's Mitch Morrison joining us in the chat. Mitch says, where do royal cats get married? Westminster Tabby. Oh boy. Oh boy. Welcome in, Mitch. Good to see you. All 3 lights coming back on here, so I should be able to refresh. And let me get logged back in here. So let's go full screen again. Right click, full screen. Oh, it saved my password. Sure how handy that's going to be. We'll go down here and we'll see the same password in we did before. Now we should have the latest firmware. Now I just want to check on this router, and again, this is a travel router, so its default settings may be different than a home router. I want to see if network sharing is enabled. I'm just curious. Like if we look at upgrade, we should see that we've got 4318 and verify our firmware's up to date. That's all down here. And up onto clients, we should see everything that's plugged in. Now what's interesting is we see the UN 1250, because that's the machine we're on right now. And then I also see an AX16 Pro, which hasn't been turned on in a long time, and a Galaxy Book 3. That's my laptop that's on the network I'm essentially plugged into. And then the MSO1 just showed up just now. So all of that's good. My question is, does this router have, like under network, under LAN, local area network, are we allowing file sharing here, or has that been disabled? You see, there is a guest network. Are we on the private one or are we on the guest one? Oh, the guest network is 192.168.9, and the private network is 192.168.8. Did you notice that? So that means if we didn't want file sharing, we'd be on the guest network, and you can assign that based on the MAC address of the machine. It gets a little complicated. I don't want to get into that today, but these options are all in there depending on how detailed you want to go with your own security. If there's anybody in the building you want to keep out. I'm assuming you live alone and you have 2 or 3 computers and you want to share files and you don't want to have to enter your own name and password every single time because that's just stupid. The fact that you're in the building gives you access, right? And if you don't belong in the building, you've got bigger problems. So that's the way I see it. And I just want to make sure that it's like firewall. That would be the other thing, that we make sure that we have the ability to share. Port forwarding, I don't care about. DMZ, I'm not worried about that either. That's more related to going outside of the building. So out of curiosity, if I just go to my yellow folder now, since the router rebooted, now if I go to network, what do I see? Anything? Okay, this is good. Remember, let me go back to camera 1 so you can just tell I haven't changed anything here. We're on the UN1250. This is the MSO1. Our HDMI cable and our keyboard and our mouse, we're on this unit right here. And the unit it sees on the network is this one over here. And we could share 1,500 folders on this if we want, or we can share one folder with 1,500, and I'm just making up a number. 1,500 can be any number. 1 or 2 or 3 subfolders, and within those you can keep going and cascading down and down and down. So in its most basic form, we've shared one folder on the desktop. Didn't have to be on the desktop. It could be anywhere on the system, but you don't want to share system folders. I don't even think Windows allows you to share your Windows folder. You'd be foolish to share your Windows folder. So anyway, let's go to full screen over here so I can see it. And I'll take my mouse, and again, we're on this machine, and let's see if we see the shared folder over here. Double click. Now it says Windows cannot access it. So now we see it where we weren't seeing it before. And that does seem to be related to restarting the router with the firmware update. I don't know why. A lot of times when we're doing this networking stuff, when we restart things and it just fixes it, we don't need to know why, unless it's a problem that continues to happen. When a problem continues to happen, that's really easy to diagnose. That means every single time I click on MSO1, I always get the same error. Okay, what that suggests to me is I might need those Windows 11 fixes I talked about that do our guest fallback sign-in. And what that requires is me running PowerShell with these 2 commands here. And this is explained in a different video, and this is a security thing that was introduced in Windows 11 24H2. Again, you should only have to do this once. I'm just going to right-click on this command and choose to copy it. I'm going to open PowerShell. See where it says PowerShell here, and then there's an arrow to the right. Run as administrator. Hoping my camera's not covering any of this up. And it opens what looks like a command box. I'm going to Control V to paste that command in and hit enter. Then it's going to ask me for confirmation. And I'm going to click yes or Y for yes. The second thing I do is this other command, and this is all explained in my other video. This is disabling guest fallback, or rather, we want to make sure that guest fallback is on or true. True is on or enabled. So let's go back over here. Control V to paste that, enter, yes, and just exit this. And we can close this out. Now when I click on this, I can see it. Isn't that incredible? I didn't even have to reboot. Now if I even want to run CPU-Z remotely from the MSO1, I click on that executable, click yes, and I didn't even have to copy the files over. So what about the other way around? Now that we've got this working in one direction, we're good to go. Everything works here. Let's switch back over to the MSO1 and see if we can see it the other way now. So I'll unplug my HDMI cable from the 1250 there, plug it into the MSO1. Once again, I need a keyboard and a mouse, and so we'll take that and plug it in up here. Just like that. Let's go to our yellow folder and let's see if we see the UN1250. Under Network, and give it a minute, right? There's the UN1250, double click. There's my shared stuff. Remember the folder we shared earlier, and within that, we have all these other folders that we can access. Now, for some of you, you might have said, well, that was a lot of process. But it's a lot of security. We're getting past firewalls, router settings, making sure drivers are updated, the router is updated. By the way, this is all stuff you should have been doing all along, and because it never affected you, you just never occurred to you to do it. If I was the IT guy at a company that you run, I would be doing this all the time, regardless if you say anything is wrong, because it's the way it's supposed to be set up and maintained. As I mentioned, once you update this, you don't have to reconfigure it. However, you should still be getting driver updates. You should still be getting firmware updates for the router. You should still be checking for those updates on a somewhat regular basis, at least twice a year. And that way it keeps everything running. Instead of just saying, well, I've set it once and I never have to set it again. That's true as far as configuration goes. But then there's maintenance. Configuration is not maintenance. Maintenance is not configuration. And what I just showed you here was both. We did both maintenance and configuration. And the reason why that's an important distinction is a lot of people will say, here's how you set up networking in Windows, and they just do the configuration. And then you do it at home, and it doesn't work for you, just like it didn't work for us. And then suddenly, when we got our updates, including the router, whatever this wanted, I don't know, make sure all your updates are in there. If you continue to have problems, that's when you start updating network card drivers. If it's a network card made by Realtek, go to realtek.com. If it's Intel, do a Google search for that Intel card driver. That's leading you to Intel.com's website, not anybody else's. Or if you bought a motherboard from Asus or ASRock or MSI or Gigabyte, if you just want to play it safe, go to that motherboard support page and get the driver from the motherboard manufacturer or the network card that's built in, whether it's wireless or Wi-Fi or both. This helps your security. Everything will work a lot smoother. Again, they're not paying developers an annual salary to sit around and refine code when there's other things that could be done that earns them money. Updating the drivers doesn't earn them any money. It costs them lots of money. It's not like they just write it and send it out. It all has to go through research and testing, quality control, and then release. It's very, very expensive. So if they're releasing that update that they just invested all this money in developing and testing, you should have no hesitation in grabbing that. The people that say, well, these updates, they're breaking my computer. No, you're breaking your computer. You're the thing that needs to be updated. Once you start following these rules, all the problems go away. Most of the problems go away because you're now being proactive. It wouldn't even hurt you to update your card driver now. Even if you're not having any problems at all, I'll bet you 90% of the viewers are running old network card drivers. You want to see? Let's look at the MSO1. This is the oldest, and besides, it's already hooked up. Let's go back and let's just put our money where our mouth is, okay? Even though we're not having any problems, if you're looking for a way to tune up your computer, if you're somebody who's just bored looking for some way you can make your computer better, my advice to you is don't mess around in your registry. Don't follow these tips about disabling services. Don't do it. These will come back to bite you in the butt. But when it comes to like your networking, especially if you want to share files, or you're on the internet regularly, as most of us are, and you want to make sure you've got the best connection possible, especially with Wi-Fi, the driver can make an improvement in your signal strength and reliability of your wireless connection. If you're wired, it's also possible that it not only enhances the security of the wired Ethernet data transmission, but also could resolve any file sharing problems. Even if you're not file sharing today, but you decide you want to file share a year from now, at least your driver is much more recent and less likely that that becomes an issue when you're trying to get it working. So proactive. Worst case scenario, you put the driver in and all hell breaks loose, just uninstall the driver. Don't pay money for drivers. Drivers come with the product direct from the manufacturer. Otherwise, you're being taken advantage of. Any driver installers, anything that costs money for drivers is taking you to the cleaners. Now, let me go back over here. Let's go to, this is camera 2. And let's take a look at our device manager. Now remember, this gets more complicated because we have 5 network cards in this computer. If I come down here to the Start menu and go to Device Manager, everything's alphabetized. We're going to go to the letter N, like network, and look at, we've got our Ethernet controller. Oh, it's two 2.5s. Our first 2.5 LAN, second 2.5 LAN. We've got a converged network adapter. That is the SFP plus, the first one. That's the FSP plus, the second one. This is our wireless Wi-Fi 6E. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right there. So I'm only using one of them. And the one I'm using right now, which one is it? Well, here's an easy way to tell. I'm going to just give you the basic. Like, I don't know which switch controls which light bulb. Turn the switch off. You'll find out real quick. You don't need to get a wire tracing set and find continuity to figure it out. So if I right-click on this controller, because I know it's this one or this one, I'm not on the SFPs and I'm not on the Wi-Fi. So I'm on this one or this one. How can I tell? Right-click, and this isn't the only way, but let's just disable it. Now let's see, does our little screen go to a little disconnect? It does not. So let's turn that one, let's turn this one off, the dash V one, right-click, disable it. And let's see, after we disable it, if our little screen down in the corner becomes a globe. So gee, I wonder which one we're using. So that tells me we're using the dash V. So let's turn that back on, right-click, and enable device. And then we should see that little globe down in the right corner become a monitor again. That's how I know which connector I'm on without breaking out a fluke tester or wasting my time with all this tech minutia that doesn't really matter when all you got to do is flip a switch to see which light bulb turns on and off. Life is simple if you keep it so, and many of the computer-related types of upgrades and repairs I have to do. Don't need specialty tools for this. Now, the reason I want to know which adapter I'm on is to just give you an example in real life, live and unscripted, about driver version. And when I right-click that, it says update driver, but that's asking Microsoft if they have a new driver. Well, if they did, don't you think they would have offered it to me? So this is a waste of time, in my opinion. I want to go to the properties of this particular device, and under the driver tab, I want to see the date and the version. Now we know the name is Intel Ethernet Controller i226V. So I just, using the same computer, type in, guess what? Intel i226V driver, enter. I don't even care if you're using Intel's driver updater, because sometimes it's not offering you the latest drivers for things like Wi-Fi and Ethernet. And you'll see we're going to go to intel.com. We're not going to Major Geeks. We're not going to Microsoft or Reddit. We're going to go to download drivers and software at Intel. And we're looking for the i22V driver. Now what's interesting is it didn't specifically take us there. So again, we can go back and refine the search, or we can just say, okay, well, this is the auto driver updater we've shown before, but let's just go to Ethernet products. And now you're going to see every Ethernet product Intel's ever made, which is a long list. So we can search by, let's see, can I refine that? Wow, there's a lot of stuff. So this says there are gigabit Ethernet controllers up to 2.5 gig here and here. I don't know what the difference is. I'm going to just pick one and see if the I226V is in here. This is a complete adapter driver pack. In other words, this is a giant file that installs version 2.9.5 that supports more or less all of those Ethernet drivers from Intel that are 1 or 2.5 gig. And it's probably pretty big. It was released just a couple weeks ago, which is obviously much newer than what we have. But that doesn't mean every single driver it contains in this package all have been updated. So let's just click on that. This is probably pretty big. Yeah, 826 megs, because it contains the drivers for about 100 different video Ethernet adapters that Intel has made. But 29.5, we have a fast connection, so rather than just get the specific Intel driver, let's just grab all of them in a package, and it will auto-detect which of that batch we have and apply the driver automatically. That's how Intel does it. Okay, that's one way Intel does it. We could also go to Minisforum and download the driver from them, but I know the Intel driver is going to be newer because Minisforum doesn't necessarily stay up to date on the latest unless there's a reason to. Their reason and my reason are different. I want to be proactive. They just want to make sure everything works without potentially breaking anything. So they're on a better safe than sorry, which is very different than my better safe than sorry. Now remember, we're still connected up through this little travel router. So my connection speed is going to be a little bit hindered because this is not a 2.5 gig connection on my portable router. So I'm moving it around half speed right now since I hooked this up to demonstrate networking. And since we're still talking about networking, I'm leaving it hooked up this way just as part of the overall demonstration. In most cases, when you do this, you, the human being, won't notice any difference from one version of the driver to another. You shouldn't. Shouldn't be any better, shouldn't be any worse. Just because you don't experience any difference doesn't mean you're not more secure or that your connection's a little bit faster or even more reliable. It may not be something you notice. On the other hand, if you're having networking issues, this could resolve it. Or if you're not having network issues, it may be because you already have a newer driver installed. Therefore, you never had to have that bad experience because this is being proactive. So we're going to open up the zip file, and inside of it, there should be some kind of a setup or an executable file that's going to take care of all this for us. So once again, looking in the device manager at this I226V, we are running 2.1.3.15. Okay, I want you to remember that, because this is telling us up here it could be 2.9.5. It says 29. It could be a completely different driver version because Intel labels drivers differently than the manufacturers do. So that's why we want to make sure, regardless of where the driver came from, Windows Update, we want to just maybe look at the date. So if nothing else, remember June 29th of 2023. Close that out. Now this is the inside of that zip file, which we need to extract all of this, and we'll just extract it in our downloads folder. That's fine. Now I would need to do this for all of the network adapters. So if one's made by Realtek, if one is made by MediaTek, we'd have to go to those different companies to get those drivers. The advantage where Intel puts all of these 1 and 2.5 gig network card drivers together in one giant package is the other 4 network adapters I have, if they're made by Intel, will automatically be updated as well because those drivers may be in this package. So then in that case, that saves me time. But I'm only using one network driver or one network card anyway. So if I'm not using the network card, the driver version doesn't really matter. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to use it in 2 months from now. And then I'm going to have to diagnose a problem because I didn't do this. So what I'm looking for is some sort of an executable file here. And I don't see anything at all. This is when I was not expecting this. So what I would do next is simply close these out, go back to my start button, right click back to the device manager, right back where we were. Under the I226V, when I go into the driver, click Update the driver, say to browse my computer for the driver, and then point it to my downloads directory where I just extracted release 29.5, and it will automatically search through all the subfolders. And it's installing. It found something newer and it's applied it. Close, and now our driver is from February 20th, 2024, and it's driver version 2.1.4.3. You say, well, did it say 29.5? Because it is a massive compilation of drivers from Intel, that's the version of the compilation. And that probably gets its number from the highest version of the latest driver in that package. Remember, Intel makes multiple different network cards. So if you want to specifically get only the driver for the network card you have, we could have searched for that and found it. But I was being lazy. I said, there's a big compilation of drivers from Intel. It's official. It's free. It's real. I was expecting an executable. We didn't have it. That's okay. Just go into the driver manager or device manager and update it. We can do the same thing over here. Double click on this one. We can enable it. That's fine. Finish. Now, which driver do we have here from Intel? This one, again, we're back to 6/29/2023, June 29th, driver version 2.1.3.15. This is interesting because, again, when Microsoft provides the drivers to you, their driver numbers can be a whole different series of numbers. It's very convoluted. That's why sometimes you might say, well, when I use the Intel driver updater, it tells me I need a new graphics driver, but Windows Update then says I need a new graphics driver. It's the same driver. Intel has to have their own numbering scheme to prevent confusing on their side, and Intel has their own version numbering scheme to prevent confusion on their side. They don't want to adapt Microsoft's numbering system, and Microsoft doesn't want to adapt their numbering system. Otherwise, you run into all kinds of confusion where Microsoft says, well, we number it this way for Intel, but we number it this other way for Realtek. If you were Microsoft, you'd understand you really don't have any choice here. And this can get really confusing. So 2.3.15, let's do the same thing. Update driver, browse for the driver, and remembers our last place we looked. We're going to look in the same place for this other driver. It is in that big package. It's installed. And now when we go back and look, we're 2.1.4.3. So that is, in this example, the numbers follow in that they're larger. But don't be thrown if the number's smaller. That's why that happens. You just want to make sure the date is newer. Now, did that make any difference in our networking? Probably made none whatsoever that we're aware of, but that doesn't mean it didn't make it more secure or more reliable. And again, if we go to this computer, back over to network, we should still be able to see the UN 1250 and, of course, the shared folder within. All right, so is networking really that complex? Once this is set up, we never have to do that ever again. And, sharing future folders is already just right-click and share and give the permissions. That's it. You've got all the hard work behind you, and it'll stay that way indefinitely. Just keep it maintained. All right, with that, I want to remind you, if you do have questions, we do have a forum, and that is at CareyHolzman.boards.net, not .com, .net. So CareyHolzman, in fact, let me share my screen with you so you can see. Right here. CareyHolzman.boards.net is what I'll type in and hit enter. And this is our forum. It's completely free. We have no intention to monetize this. Sign up, create a free account, go ahead and register here. We're not asking you for, any credit card information or anything like that. We're trying to encourage community interaction when we're not live, or even while we are live, anytime, 24/7, holidays, whatever, doesn't matter. The board is up 24/7, and you go into our general discussions here, and you can create your own thread, answer somebody else's thread, and communicate with one another. You can start by just creating a new thread, introducing yourself. Tell us who you are. Maybe include a picture of your face so we can see what you look like. if you want to and if you're comfortable with it. We don't have to know personal information, but if you say, hey, here, from Hawaii, that's cool. I'm from Pittsburgh, cool. Sort of generic info that helps us to get to know you. Maybe tell us what your interest in computers is in, or how you got interested in it, what you have now. And just let the natural flow of conversation occur as we all help each other. So I will pop in from time to time, but I also want to encourage you guys, if somebody's asking a question and you know the answer, please provide it. If I don't agree with it, I'll say as much, but I don't want you to be discouraged. Just provide your answer, because more times than not, you guys do have the right answers, and you save me having to do the work, and you help each other out, and that's what this community is all about. So we'd love to see you get signed up. It's completely free. Just click register. Very simple sign-up process. And we'd love to see you in there. My thanks, of course, to Mara for all the work she does in the background and all the administrative tasks of running this channel, from the thumbnails, the video descriptions, working out arrangements with hardware manufacturers for us to review, or in this case, setting up the whole forum. She's done that all from scratch. That's all her. And if you guys email us, our email address is right here on the screen. So if you want to reach out, she also handles all the incoming email and will get me involved when necessary. And this frees me up to do all the other stuff around here. It takes a huge burden off my shoulders. So feel free to reach out anytime. But again, that's to us personally. Really would encourage you guys to interact with each other in our forums if you haven't already. And until next time, bye for now.